Welcome back to Leicester City Down Under. Here again, a vanilla as always. How are you, mate?
Very good. Interesting summer that we've had. Been enjoying watching the Euros. England have somehow scammed their way to the final. Let's see what wins. Does vibes win or does tactics win? I've actually got a funny feeling vibes is going to win. So let's see how that goes.
Oh, really? We'll talk about that later. Actually, I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you about that. Mate, Wilf has finally re-signed. Looks like he couldn't find a better option.
Absolutely. Well, I was just having a look at some of the stats, and like he really comes up quite good. I mean, we've been linked with Matt O'Reilly, and I actually compared those two players. Actually, I can bring it up in a second. And if you look at it, like, Wolves a better player and probably played in a more competitive division. So I think that goes to show you that it is a good signing. And for that reason, it's great to have him on board. It'd be interesting to see what position he plays. Let me just show you this. Bring up for anyone who's going to be watching it on. There you go. So let's zoom in here a little bit. So here's him against Matt O'Reilly, and you can see Matt O'Reilly is actually a pretty good player, but you can see Wolves actually more productive in terms of shots on total and the amount of goals that he scored, which is pretty interesting. And in fact, someone even said to me, if you compared these two players, you think Matt O'Reilly is the central defensive midfielder and Wolf is the attacking midfielder. But most people would consider them to be the other way. That said, I think O'Reilly would be a good signing. I don't think we'd get him. He's been linked with Atalanta. We can talk about that a bit later. But yeah, Wolf, I think if you were to try and pick up a player like this with spending money, you're probably talking £20 million in current Premier League. So we've signed him on the free. He knows the club. He can get involved. With a very good season last season. It was definitely noticeable when he was not in the team. He's versatile. He can play multiple positions. He played centre back for us at some points in the past. I hope that doesn't happen, but he has done it. He was a top draw CDM at one point, but he showed he's got more to his game. And that's if you have been following the Euros, we saw the resurgence of N'Golo Kante. He actually won man of the match in 2 different matches, and he was playing as a more advanced midfielder there, but just winning the ball back. And it goes to show that in modern football, winning the ball back quickly high up the field, that's an important commodity to have. We know Wilf can do that, and he can also do it previous back on the pitch. So I'm delighted. Maybe the slight worry is why didn't he do it straight away? He was probably shopping around, but he looked pretty happy, and it was quite a funny announcement video for it. So I was happy to see that.
Oh, mate, big time. And I kind of got the vibe that he was kind of looking for a better offer. And just good comment here has just come in from Diego. How are you, mate? Hopefully he could play that box to box this upcoming season to a high level. We'll get into the potential 11 soon, Diego, and talk potential strategy. I think he likes that role, but the question is, I know you like your stats, Anil, but do you think he can do that high pressing 8 role in the Premier League? And do you think that's what he wants to do? Because it's very interesting.
I think he can do it, yes. Will he be used that way? We have no idea. It's going to make pre-season extremely interesting. I will say that Steve Cooper, unlike Enzo Maresca, he's shown that he's more of a horses for courses type of manager. So he will definitely have his own preferred system, but he will happily adapt it based on who's going to be playing in what game and move it around. And therefore, I feel you could actually see Wilf being used in both those different positions. Just speaking, we're going to probably get to this in a minute, but our first game is against Spurs. Spurs are managed by Ange Postecoglou. He plays a high pressing system. He pushes high up the field. So, I can already picture in my mind how I think Wilf will be used that way. But put it this way, if we hadn't lost our manager, if Enzo would have stayed, I'm not sure Dewsbury Hall would have stayed because it looked like we had to get rid of him for PSR rules, but I still think he probably would be tried in the current system that he's been used at because he did well last season. Like I said, if you look at the stats that I shared there, he was in like the top percentile, like top 3 or 5%. And so, that would be the sort of player that normally teams from the division above would be looking to sign. And you can see that already, like Ipswich, they've signed Amari Hutchinson, but they also wanted Philogene, although Philogene's gone back to Villa, which is crazy. They made like an 8 million loss on it. I mean, he's a great player. I would have loved to have seen him here, but they've signed him. It looks like Jacob Greaves is going to Ipswich. And so what all these players have in common, they're players that were amongst the top performing in the championship and were looking to be summed up. So, I think he could do it. But look, it's all speculation, right? We don't know what they're working on, and that's part of the interest. But finally, I would say that I do know that at the start of last season, he was highly linked with going to Forest. And at the time, who was Forest's manager? It was Steve Cooper. So it's funny how these things go. And I've got a feeling that he definitely has a plan. In the end, they signed Ibrahim Sangare instead. Then if you remember him, he used to play for PSV. He had 2 very strong games against us when we played him in the
Yeah, I
Europa League.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you, I didn't really catch a lot of Forest Arsene because obviously we were interested in the Championship. But he was a player that I thought did look like, you know, to be honest with you, the most Ndidi looking player, maybe a bit better in some regards, a bit worse. I'm interested how he got on there. I heard he didn't have the best season, which surprised me because he looked like just one of those players that you think this guy is going to be a beast in the Premier League, you know. But it is funny how sometimes those work out.
It is, and it's interesting because that's a good segue what you just said earlier about, you know, top end championship players and making a move to the Premier League. I think still sorely we need to strengthen in the midfield. We'll go through that in the potential 11 of what we have available now. But what do you think of the new signings? Let's get into that. We've got Cordova and Okoli. Let's start with Cordova, what you think about him and what kind of a signing you think that is.
He's a super solid player. What's interesting about him is he's an extremely versatile player. Let me see if I can bring this up. He can play in multiple positions. I think the most obvious position he will play will be as a squad rotation option for Steffi Mabadidi, who we didn't really have last season, if you think about it. So I think that's a very useful thing to have. But he's played in many positions. He's actually said that his favorite position is the 10. He's even played as like wing back. He's played in midfield. He's played at like, I think he even had one game at centre half. I'm not even making up. So it's crazy. So super versatile. So look, we've lost all Brighton. He left on a free. So I think he's that specific replacement, and I think he's operating at a higher level. And I would say, if I had to put it this way, if we'd have signed Bobby Dekova-Reid in January when we were making the push up, would that be considered a good business? I think that would be seen as extremely good business. I think the only downside of him is he's 31. So he's been given a 3-year deal. So what's he going to do in his final season? But look, I guess we can look at that at that point. And Albrighton was still, look, if he's still got value, he could come on an impact player. I think the interesting thing with him is, has he been signed as a squad player or has he been signed for the first team? And everyone would think, oh, well, he's obviously been signed as a squad player. But I wouldn't be so sure about that because you got to remember, he played in the Premier League. Our players played in the Championship. He actually had a goal involvement every, I think, 150 minutes or something like that. Extremely good. Like, I often think of these things. The best way is to like look at what the opposing team's fans think of the player. And they were like, he was underrated. They knew he was a good player and they wanted him to stay, but they can understand why he's gone. Similarly, like say for Tawu, the Sporting fans were like, oh, I don't think it's a good idea to get rid of this one. He's got potential. So it'd be interesting to see how he is. But look, given that we signed him for absolutely nothing, and we got PSR restrictions, that seems to me like a pretty smart signing to make, even if he's got no resale value. I also know he's supposed to be extremely professional, like a good egg, so to speak, and he's a fighter. And Fulham, they had to fight quite hard. You know, they ended up staying up quite comfortably, but it's because players like him done their bit. So he'll get stuck in. So I think that's a good signing. So how about you? What do you think of Bobby?
I would like to, I've just started planning on watching all the games while he was at Fulham for the last season, because there's only so much you can gather from a highlight. Like you want to see them week in, week out to get a better perspective of them. But the only thing, I know this sounds negative, that I didn't like about it was that it was a 3-year deal at 31. So we're basically stuck with him, as we are for Yannick, depending on the wages they're on. But
how old is Jamie Vardy, by the way?
He's a freak of nature, bro. Cordova is no Vardy. Let's not make that comparison.
I mean, not being funny or anything, but I feel like of the two, who's probably more likely to keep themselves in better shape? You know, that's the thing. I tell you, if you just bring up my screen quickly, I'll show you Bobby. Can you see this? So here's Bobby Dekova-Reid. He says Fulham, but you can tell by that shirt who he's playing for. But yeah, look at these positions that he's played in. Pretty mental. So that is a super versatile player. And, you know, look, I think his key thing, he says his favourite position is the number 10, and he's got quite a high rating for playing there, although that was only one appearance, perhaps, but he's come on as a sub. So, you know, he's pretty versatile. That's pretty good. So I think, and yeah, 6 goals in not so many appearances, a lot of them coming off the bench. That's very useful. That's some decent firepower. So I think that, good signing that, I think. Solid.
Good signing. Good signing. And a couple of comments from here. He was a Cape Copa America too. Thank you for the comments, Diego. Sorry, I forgot to say hello to Glenn earlier, mate. Thank you for popping in. I hope you're well. Let's get on to Okoli. Now, I know you weren't very convinced early when we signed him. I remember you put in the group chat something to do with his stats, and he's a bit scary on the ball. This is also a leading good into a potential 11. If you remember do you remember when Ndidi first signed, we looked at his stats, and I remember thinking to myself, it's not the most convincing for the amount of time he's had goals and assists wise, and it looks like on paper he could be good, but frustrating to watch, and he kind of proved to do so, but better than his stats would provide. So he was one of those where you feel like he could have scored more, but like when he usually had his fullbacks on ice, and he tracked back as well. So Okoli, could he mold into that potential, next decent centre back for us? We'll find out soon. But I'm a little on the fence. I don't know so much about him, so I haven't got too strong opinion yet. But I am looking forward to the first preseason game. And Neil, what do you think of the signing? Because we have a lot of centre backs now, and I expect some to go for sure. But we're going to find out this preseason.
Yeah, that I think is one of my concerns. So one, I feel like we're collecting centre backs like stamps. We've got quite the collection here now. You got to remember that last season we signed Connor Cody, didn't play much for us. We still got Harry Suter from the season before. It's barely made any game. Like, you add those two together, I don't think they've made 50 appearances for the club combined, and that's for like a 20 million outlay. Now, that said, Leicester do have an extremely good record of signing centre-backs. We somehow managed to Jesus them out of nowhere. Wes Morgan, $1 million, unbelievable signing. Robert Huth on the free. Initially, when he came in, he didn't look that interested. People like he's just come here to, have a relegation party sort of thing. He ended up being one of the best signings we've ever made. Then we have Harry Maguire, Wesley Fofana, Kadja Sayonchu, Johnny Evans. We do seem that it's almost like we have a good record. Like when we get one that's good, we get one that's very good. Now, this one I suspect is coming from Martin Glover, and at the moment he's got more right than wrong. So I think that's extremely promising. He's represented the Italian under 21, under 18s, under 17s teams. He's got a lot of pedigree there. Atalanta do tend to pick good players, and they're used to playing sort of high aggression, high pressure football. He didn't have the best season, I believe, at Frosinone, who is this Italian team that got relegated. That said, he did play at a level, you'd still say Serie A is at a higher level than the Championship. So he's still got experience in terms of doing that. I think the one thing that I question is he's not left-footed, which surprised me. So the thing is, if I'm being honest, the player that I would have signed, if I was going to go for a centre-back, is I think I would have gone for Jacob Greaves from Hull, because he is a left-sided centre-back. He's a little bit older, but he's got experience of the English game. He's very good on the ball. He's quite impressive throughout the season last year at Hull. They really liked him, and I believe he has gone to Ipswich, maybe for slightly more, but it's about the same sort of fee. So in my head, I'm comparing the two. I would say though that Greaves doesn't seem to be as quick a player as Okoli, and Okoli definitely has that physicality to him. So I think the reason he's been signed, I think, to be fair to Steve Cooper, like when Forest battered us 4-1 in the FA Cup, one of the things that they did that was really good is they got in our face and they really just bullied us, to be honest with you. All over the field, they bullied us. And if you look at some of the players that he signed at Forest, Chris Wood, Ibrahim Sangare, he definitely liked people that were kind of monstrous, because that is important, right? You can literally bully some of these teams with their technical players by having that. And I think if you're a team that's expected to be down the bottom, having that type of player could also be important. We also know that we lack pace, although I don't know if you have JJ in the team. Do you lack pace? I don't think you lack that much pace. So we've got it there. Well, look, as I say, we've got a good record with centre-backs, and he's 21 years old. So normally what tends to happen with us is we sign these promising young players and we have a good record at developing them and making them worth a lot more. So that's definitely possible. But look, until we see him play, the jury's kind of out. Like I say, my slight fear is that some of the Atalanta fans were like, oh my God, I can't believe they're paying this amount of money for him. Now, to be fair, there's a Premier League tax, right? So that doesn't mean he's a bad player. And to put it in comparison, yeah, like Ipswich just signed Amari Hutchinson for 22 million. Now, he was very good in the Championship, but I mean, that's more than what we're paying for Fatawu, right? That's more than we paid for Ndidi. So they're definitely getting taxed the premium. You'd probably be able to find a player cheaper than that abroad, but then you don't know how they're going to perform. So there's always that kind of risk to it. So he's going to be okay. I think really though, if we're prioritizing signing a centre back so quickly, what does that suggest? Well, I think when we get onto the formations, it probably gives it away. But look, it is important to note that last season when we played, do you call it a 4-3-3 or do you call it a 3-4-2-1? I would probably say it's a 3-4-2-1 because 80% of games we were in that formation, if not longer. But that was in a division where we were expected to be making the running. That's not necessarily the case this season. But yeah, look, I don't know a lot about him. I looked at some of the clips. He looked pretty physical. He did look a bit rash at times. I don't think he looked as good on the ball as I thought. Like for example, do I think Enzo Maresca would sign him? Not 100% sure. I think he would have preferred, Callum Doyle. But Callum Doyle, for example, he did get bullied a bit by, for example, Liam Delap, who's gone to Ipswich. He also wasn't the fastest, so maybe that's what we're looking to rectify. But as all players who come to the club, I wish them best. I don't think, who would I hate to see at the club? There's only like a handful of people that I'd really despise seeing at Leicester. So let's hope he does well. And look, the fact that he's young and promising play for Atalanta, there's surely a lot to like there. So yeah, come on, Mr. Okoli.
Mr. Okoli, I'm hoping for good things too, and I agree. It is a bit of a concern because Atlanta had just had him out on loan. They didn't really quibble over this deal. It just came out of nowhere, didn't it? So let's hope it can be molded.
That's true, Luke. But I think you've got to remember that they won the Europa League, which means they are playing Champions League. So the thing is that they're going for a different player profile. Like if I'm Gasperini, I'm thinking that the last time they got to the Champions League, I think they got to the quarterfinals or something like that. They can do damage in that division and they should be challenging for top four. So, you're either going to send him out on loan, but it's very unlikely that he's coming into the first team unless he's had an absolute blinder. So I don't think that's that surprising that they're looking to cash in on him so they can get like a big player. And actually, if you look at them, they are unfortunately losing their captain, Tyrone Cooper-Miners, to Juventus, who's one of their best players. So they're going to need to really reinforce their midfield with some, high quality signings. So I get it. At the end of the day, those clubs are still not as flush with cash as we are here. That's the crazy thing with the Premier League is that the 20th place team can pay wages better than a lot of even the top Serie A teams, which is mental, but it's actually true.
Absolute money-making business, the Premier League.
Let's
quickly against these comments. So against these 11 potential. Oh, hang on a second.
There's one more signing, though.
One more signing. Yeah, you caught me.
Let's do the comments. I think it's important to make sure that we involve the viewers. That's part of the fun of doing these things.
And there is some cracker ones coming in from Diego. This is what I agree with. You might not. I don't know if we're going to be split on this or not. Faye should go off the right deal. Comes, he's good, but we can definitely upgrade that position. We'll get into him in my 11, but in my opinion, I actually agree. He's good sometimes and does make those runs forward, and other times he can be completely scary with coming back, and he's sometimes missing and marking his man. So I would wish him well if we were to sell him. I wouldn't be losing any sleep over it. With all due respect, he's definitely good when he's good, but for me in the Premier League, he can be too much of a liability. What do you think about that, Anil?
You are me, clearly. That's what I think. I think he is rash. You see it also for Belgium as well. He really was good on the ball last season. I do have to say that. Like the way that we had of Enzo, he made some really good runs into the box. Like he won a penalty. He should have scored what could have been goal of the season. So he showed his kind of ability there. But I think this is a season where we're expected to be on the back foot for most of it. And I think there's two problems I see with that. One, which is, on a more fundamental level, he loses the flight of the ball. I see this so many times. Like the ball's coming in and he just doesn't time it right, or he positions himself wrong and he gets beaten to it. Like that's a real worry for someone who's supposed to play as a centre back. That's like a goalkeeper who comes for the ball and misses it all the whole time. That's a very dangerous thing to have. So I'm not a fan of that. And yeah, I think he has obviously been coached to be aggressive and try to win the ball back as early as possible. But in doing that, he sometimes pushes up too far, makes the challenge, gets taken out of the game, and then you're in trouble and you get turned over. And so I think ideally you want to have someone who, times their challenge a little bit more. like, it's funny because in recent seasons, I'd say we'd have 3 defenders that all played in that style. You had Soyuncu, you had Fofana, and you had Wout Faes. Soyuncu was quite similar to Faes, although I think he was much better. But he either looked elite or a bit clueless. And again, he was elite when he won the ball back quickly, but clueless when he got it wrong. But to be fair to Soyuncu, I don't think he ever lost the flight of the ball. You know, he was more solid in that way. The one I've got to say, even though people dislike him, is I do have to say that Wesley Fofana, I felt, was just like the best all round of that. He would win the ball back aggressively, but he wouldn't jump into stupid challenges very often. He was very smart on the ball. He could leap really high despite being, I don't think he was quite 6 foot, or maybe he was 6 foot on the dot. He was very good on the ball. He was amazing for a young player. I could totally understand why someone would pay that money, because especially before he was injured, I mean, he looked absolute phenomenal business. I thought he looked as good as Saliba. I think the injuries really unfortunate in what happened to him in that Villarreal friendly. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that if you want a player of that style, I want to see a bit more composure there, not just this kind of brain deadness. And I think that Wout's got that in him, to be honest with you. The funny enough, though, you know, because, for example, if you look at the way that some teams play, and I think Man City is the best example of this, is 2 players that kind of match that description were like Nathan Ake and Manuel Akanji, and yet they're central to the way that they play. But that's because they're like expected to be on the ball so much that it's their ability on the ball that is arguably more important than off the ball. So you never know. Faes, for example, he had been linked a few times with teams like Spurs and stuff like that. And I can understand why. Because, for example, if you look at a player they've got like Christian Romero, he looks either incredible because he's winning the ball back super early and pushing the whole team 20 yards up the field, or he gets beaten and spun and then a goal gets in behind, which is what I'm hoping is going to happen on game 1 of the season, that Ndidi is going to do him. But yeah, it's one of those. It's a high risk, high reward kind of style. But for me, yeah, I think especially the last time that we were up there, even though we did keep a lot of clean sheets with Wout to begin with, I think once teams figured out the best way to play against us, it was a weakness rather than a strength. So I wouldn't be against him. But look, at the same time, he was one of our better performing players overall last season in terms of consistency. And he is a Belgian international. He's literally just played in the Euros. So, you know, pros and cons there.
Pros and cons. I spot on, agree with you. Got 2 more to get into.
I can just quickly say, though, but I mean, people saying he might go. But I mean, surely you'd get rid of either Connor Cody or Harry Suter first. And that's just because they didn't play in the championship. So if they're not even capable of playing in the championship, why do you keep someone who couldn't get into the championship team, but you get rid of a Belgian international? Difference is that people might actually want Faes. That's the difference, I suppose.
That is the difference. And it's also that boils down to what's going to happen in pre-season, because that was under another manager. And now we've got a new manager and a potential new system. So that remains to be seen. But I that leads to this next comment. A few more, we'll get into Golding. Here we go here. I like the physicality and the pace. We need that if we play Suter for the added value of set pieces. Now, that also leads into another thing I want to bring up with you as well, being the assistant manager, being a set piece, I believe, coach. So that's
he's not
something
assistant, but we did hire a specific set piece coach. The assistant is an ex-assistant at Forest. He's an ex-Swansea player. It's called Alan Tate. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Caught me slipping up.
No, at all.
No. I think that's something that was sorely the one kind of void in the team in last season, was someone that was, obviously it's hard when you've just lost James Maddison, but something that is sorely lacking, and I think that can sort of be improved. And it's also another position that I would like to see personally be filled in the transfer window, but that's another conversation. But as for Suter, he never really put a foot wrong for me in the Premier League. I never really thought he was a liability. He didn't score enough. He's had some bangers playing for Australia, but like, I am Australian, and I'm telling you right now that the level of football is leaps and bounds away from anyone in Europe. So take that with a pinch of salt. He is Scottish though, and he's from Aberdeen, but his mum's from a couple of hours away from my man actually. But I think Suter might get a chance. He looked beaming when he came in for that preseason video. He looked proper happy, so he's probably going to give it a good, decent crack. He did, bro. You know what I mean? Yeah, but like,
well, because he probably knew that he's got a chance. I know that he wanted to prove himself. Look, I got to be honest though. I think this is like revisionist history by a lot of the team, where like, you know, what often happens is that like, the person who's not playing is seen as the answer. Then they like, you know, probably people are going to say the same about Boubakary Samare, and then the player will come into the team and everyone will be like, oh, now I remember why he's not in the team. because I'll be honest with you, I can only really remember one match where Harry Souttar was good, and that was away at Newcastle in the season we went down, the second last game. And that was just complete back to the wall performance, and he was okay even and quite good maybe, but I don't think he's really excellent. I remember his first game, which was like the Tete's Wonder game, if you remember that, where he had a really good debut, but Harry Souttar did not look very good in that game. So I don't want to hate him. I don't dislike him or anything like that. But I think if I'm being honest, I'm not really sure he's a Premier League player. I think Enzo had the right idea, which is that last 10 or 15 minutes, if you need someone to just see it out, like, I don't know, you somehow scammed the lead against Man City and they're throwing everything at you, maybe you bring him on. So he could have uses, but is that what he's going to be happy with, to be able to play like that the whole time? Not sure. So we'll see. Look, you never know. I like seeing redemption arcs. I think he's always shown a professional attitude, but how much did we pay for him? 15 million or something like that? I don't think he's been a good signing, to be honest with you.
No. Last one, and then we get into the good stuff. Can we sign O'Reilly? I don't want O'Hare, to be honest with you. He's 26 years old. I know he done good in his one game against us, and I'm not being sour grapes, but look, he did decent in the championship, and he's 26 now. If he was going to crack on and really prove himself, I think he would have done it by now. So in my opinion, if you think of where I know different players, but if he's replacing KDH, think of where KDH was at, 3-4 years ago for Luton, and think of O'Hare now. In my opinion, he's a top-end championship player. He's not a Premier League player. And I think we'll see that if he does end up going to Wolves. I don't know if it's Sore or Sule. I would like to see Sule come in. He could play that 10 role. What stresses me out is everyone knows in our private chat that I am having absolute fucking kittens over Fatal. We would love that just to get announced soon, because the longer this drags on, the more stresses me out thinking he's not coming.
People say that's a work permit. He's literally posted on TikTok him in one of the Leicester's Asda's, which is a supermarket. Like, you're not going to go to Asda in Leicester if you're not moving to Leicester, like, not being funny things. So I don't think you need to worry about that. Multiple people have told me that that's been done and had been done quite early. Just coming on to some of the other ones that you said. Yeah, Callum O'Hare, I don't think that's going to happen now, but I suspect that they would have signed him if Wilfred didn't sign, if that makes sense. So he was kind of the backup for that one, and that's why it didn't happen straight away, because we're still waiting for Ndidi. And now that Ndidi signed, we probably don't need to get O'Hare, unless maybe they want to add it like last day of the window or something, just to add some more cover or something like that. I don't think he's ever going to be a starter. I think you guys are a bit harsh. He's been okay, but yeah, I don't think he's likely to be a starter for a Premier League team. I think that's fair to say right now. You never know. There you go. That's because he's a lad. He's humble. That's why we love Abdul. I think that's class that he does that. He's one of us. That's great for him. Okay, then the next one, though, that I think is exciting, although I think we've got to talk about the signings that we have made. But yeah, Matthias Sule, who plays for Juventus. Now, that is an extremely exciting signing. That's the sort of one that I would say marquee signing. Now, he did play wing last season in Fataou's position, but he has also played as a 10. He used to wear the 10 in the Juventus youth teams, and he's extremely highly regarded there. He's also Argentinian international. I mean, he looks the business. I think you're only signing someone like him. If you're going to sign him, it suggests to me you're going to play a 4-2-3-1. I don't think he looks like a high-pressing number 8 to me, but who knows? But look, I think we've got a massive Dewsbury Hall gap in our team. And that's a really big problem for us, because he, in terms of goals and assists last season, was unbelievable. He was powering the team. So if we've lost, what was it? How many did he score? Something like 14 goals, 17 assists, something like that. If you've taken that out of the team, we've got to, really be careful about that and bring someone in there. So, yeah, that would be good to see. The only thing I would say, I've been following this quite closely, is there are other players that are going around Europe that we could have been interested in. So we were talking about Albert Gronbach in the January window when I think we did this. He's just gone to Rennes in France. So he's out, and he was an attacking midfielder that had extremely good goals and assists, of course, in the Norwegian league. So you don't know how that's going to go. Another one is a guy called Cameron Puertas. He plays in Belgium for Union SG, which is Brighton's old team. And he's been linked with Borussia Mönchengladbach. His stats look amazing, and he's one that I'm a bit surprised we're not in for, because they're saying 15 million euros. To me, that guy looks like a great signing. I don't know. I could see that coming from under the radar sort of thing. Matt O'Reilly, we followed him for a long time. He's a class act. He actually used to play at Milton Keynes Dons under Russell Martin. So I know Southampton are also interested in him. He's also been linked with Atalanta. But I think he's as much of a kind of like almost guaranteed performer as you could get. So yeah, I would agree with Diego there. I think he would be. I think the problem is though is that teams know that, and I therefore think he would drive the price up. We might not be able to afford him. But I think if you were going to go for like head over heart, you would choose Matt O'Reilly. And I think if you were more like, no, I just want to see someone with flair, you know, run at people, do crazy things, you go for Matthias Sule if he's available. But look, the fact that that name has been linked multiple times, yeah, not just that, but if you look at his goals and assists, he was in the top 10 players for players under 21 around Europe in terms of goal contributions. And other players on that list included Jude Bellingham, Xavi Simons, and, you know, Lamine Yamal. So he's in very good company to be there. And, you know, what I would say about him is he's a sort of player that even if you spent 30 million on him, you're probably going to sell him for 50 to 60, unless he doesn't acclimatize to the league. So there's always something to be in there. But look, let's go back to Michael Golding, because I think we're doing him a massive disrespect. Yeah.
He's one that in that same bracket, if we were to get Sule, that like you would hope that could go on to, you know, break a heart, but use us as, not many people like to hear it, a stepping stone. But as long as we turn a profit on it, that could be a very, very good signing, and one that I look forward to seeing his development in. Very highly touted, youth level for England, captained. At first, I was like, oh, 5 million for a kid that's 18 and only played a few minutes in the FA Cup match for Chelsea, and then not really played too much men's football. But then you could argue with that for that lad that's, I know he's 16, been playing for Barcelona in the Euros. I forgot his name right now. I've just drawn a blank. But
yeah, Lamine, yeah.
And or Bellingham as well, killing at Dortmund at like 17, 18. Like who knows, he could be that gem. What I would like to hope, and I'm telling myself, is that Chelsea have come to us and we've been like, look, we'll sell you Keenan Dewsbury Hall, but like maybe we want Golding, like sort of thing. I hope it's not something they just offloaded onto us. And going by his credentials, I don't think that's the case. I'm feeling very optimistic about this, but the question is, do you expect him to start? It all depends on, I guess, preseason, or I don't think we're going to send him out alone unless we make a few more signings in that midfield area.
The funny thing is, right, so I was using lineup builder for what we're going to come to near the end of the show, and there isn't even a Michael Golding on there. So the Golding that I've added is actually a different Golding. So that's sort of how fresh he is, that you can't even pick him. But he looks very promising. I think, look, for sure, let's call it as it is. There was definitely a bit of PSR stuff going this for both clubs. So Chelsea are like, look, if you do this, it allows us to show 5 million on the books, and, you know, you can do us a deal. But what I do actually respect about Leicester is that we were being linked with like Casaday again. We were being linked with like Datro Fofana, some other ones. And these ones would have been much bigger gambles, in my opinion, that aren't going to go right. Whereas this one, what you're going for is someone that probably isn't as ready right now, but the ceiling that he has is much higher, which I think is better. And look, what I think is you can make 5 subs right in the Premier League, and therefore, and we're seeing this in the Euros as well, is that you've got the concept of starters and finishers. I think the best example of this, I think, is like Leandro Trossard at the moment for Arsenal, who he actually doesn't do that well when he starts the game. But if he comes on with like 30 minutes to go, he's absolutely lethal, and he seems to like be absurd at that. So I think Golding would be great for that. I think if we're playing like, again, a high pressing system at times, and someone's run themselves into the ground after 60 minutes, which is what you'd expect, to be totally honest with you, then bring him on, and he's going to be keen, he's going to be hungry, and he can start taking his chance. And yeah, look, I think he is the sort of player that I could see, maybe not right away, but I could see himself playing himself into the team and staying there. And that is what tends to happen. Like, look at Dewsbury Hall. He was kept on after a good pre-season with Brendan Rodgers. Soumare started in front of him. And then after about 10 games, he played his way into the team. He kept in there, and he never left the team ever after that. That happens a lot. So I think it's good business for that amount of money. I also think with players like that, for 5 million, if you get it wrong, there's no real problem with it, right? The problem is when you do get a Soumare or a Daka where they're costing over 20 million and they go wrong, teams like us can't really afford to do that. You have to be very careful in your signing. So I'm quite excited for him, and he does appear in some of my lineup. So there's kind of like my spoiler there. I could see him starting, but I think most likely he'll be eased in. But I think around Christmas time, it'll be interesting to see where he's at. But worst case scenario, him, and I think we should say this about a lot of our signings, is the reality is that most pundits are going to have us favourites to be relegated and to finish 20th out of 20 in the Premier League. So if that were to happen, we've got to have one eye on that. We've got to make sure that we've got players that could also do a job in the Championship. And I think Michael Golding, I think will probably be a star player down there because he could probably go already there. I think Dakova Reed, with the wages we're giving him, he'll stay and probably help us get us back out there. And probably Okoli as well, where at that age, it probably won't harm him that much to have a season off in the Championship as long as we get back right away. So I think that's something we have to take in regards, and I think they're all good. But yeah, I think Golding is more likely going to be coming on later. And yeah, I assume we are going to sign another midfielder, and it'll be interesting to see who that is.
I'll finish this. We'll get this to 11. Yeah. I spot on agree. In my opinion, to finish it up with Golding, I would like to see him go on loan to the Championship until January. If we were to strengthen, I think expect to see 2 players in that position. And if he does well and he's playing regularly, bring it back, particularly if we're not doing well. And again, to add on to what you're saying, it's a harsh reality that not many people want to hear. Depending on these points deduction, we could be going back down, and he could be one to develop then. But in my opinion, get him in there sooner. Right.
Well, but do you not think, though, that playing half an hour every week is not good? I mean, that's what I'm saying is you're going to learn more that way because you're going to be playing.
You are.
Yeah.
The major caveat to that is, though, I know his ceiling is a lot higher than Luke Thomas, but if let's say we're struggling and we've got a points deduction hanging over our heads, you don't want to ruin his confidence. Let's say we send him off for 6 months and we do get someone a bit more old, a bit more experienced, and let's say he goes to someone like Hull or someone like that, Norwich, and he starts killing it week in, week out, bring him back.
Okay, well, I've got a feeling he won't go on loan, so there's my
I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay. I nearly done separate lineups. I didn't have time. I whip this up quickly. This is what I would personally like and kind of expect to see. Now, this is going to be interesting. So, obviously, Man's in a goal.
This is extremely close to one of mine. I'm not going to lie. So, let's bring this up. Yeah.
Okay.
So, can I ask you, is this what you would do, or is this what you expect?
This is what I would do.
Okay.
With elements of what I kind of expect, but there's 2 I'll get into. JJ, I think, plays better on the right. We've bought a Coley for 15 million. So, in my opinion, we are going to see him. And he plays in as a left back 3. So, it goes into what you were mentioning last time, which I thought was a very good point that you made. And Neil's stream was Mark Glover has a lot of control over these signings and he's done a good job. And when they would have interviewed, I think you said Cooper, Glover would have had a strong. You said that, this is how we play. This is the kind of brand we're looking for. It had to have been part of the interview process. So I expect to see O'Cole in the back 3. Vestergaard's just re-signed. Now, that's one that's a major asterisk for me with the preseason. I know we've signed him for 3 years and go into what we said about Glover, but in my opinion, he might not even be in that position. But for me, Yannick Vestergaard controlling, disposing of the ball. Now, Wilfred and Ndidi. I think he's going to play in that holding midfield position again, and we know he can do it at his best. Alongside him, obviously, Harry Winks, we all know he's going to be there. Now, you could make the argument you could swap Wilfred and Ndidi with Ricardo Pereira. The reason I put Ricardo up forward as the high-pressing 8 is I think he's better in that position than Wilf. And with the squad we have available right now, he's shown that he can do it, and I think he can do a great job there in the Premier League. We know he can. Fatawu on the right wing, provided that we actually get him. And going to what you said earlier, I had seen that interview as well at Fulham. Cordova does prefer to play in that midfield area, and with what we have available, it could be him, could be Golding, Ndidi, left wing, and Vardy. I still have a lot of hope for Cannon, but I just can't see him starting over Vardy unless there's a really good preseason. Daka, I just hope that we can somehow sell him. I don't like him. I don't rate him. I don't even want to see him play for us this season.
Wow.
Tell us how you really feel. So I'm expecting Vardy to start. This could all massively change. We know this is all hypothetical, but that is the lineup that I would like to see.
So what's interesting there, I would say, though, is that let's just get this right. So this is definitely against Spurs, right? You're thinking, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the biggest thing you've got here is you've changed over the positions of Ndidi and Ricardo. But that I would, well, I'll show you what mines I've got. But I think my fear there is that there's a reason why Enzo didn't play Wilfred in those positions, which is that if you are looking to be playing out from the back, that he's not the best on the ball that way, right? And the way that they play as well with their attacking tens, well, they also don't try and build up with their kind of defensive mids as well. So you might want Will from them to try and win the ball off them. We can kind of see. So it depends. But look, we have no idea what's going to set up. But I mean, yeah, I can. It makes sense what you've kind of got there. I mean, is it okay if I share my screen now?
Of course, mate.
Yeah, I mean they're quite similar, but I'm going to give you like a few. I'm actually going to give you to start with what I think Cooper will do, because it's not what we would do, but this is like a bit of quite a hot take here. But I'll explain. I don't whether we'll see this or not. I don't know, but I'll show you what I've got here.
I bet you it's 3-5-2. Let's go. No, 3-4-3.
It's actually a 3-4-3, and this is actually what Southgate is using in the Euros at the moment. But it's not like he came up with it. It's been used by a few things. So there's quite a few controversial things here, right? So when you're playing a 3-4-3, the difference is you kind of have 2 10s rather than 2 wingers, right? And you use, are they fullbacks? Are they wingers? More as a kind of width, right? So what I'm thinking here, especially if you're going to be playing Spurs first game of the season, is you probably want to have like a threat on the break, but you want to be fairly defensively stable. So yeah, I've kind of gone similar to you that you got a double defensive pivot here of Ndidi and Winks. Now, the big thing I've got here is got Fatau actually at the left wing, right? Not in his normal preferred position, which probably sounds mental. Like I say, I think Cooper's the sort of manager that will do horses for courses. So I don't think this is the formation that you use all the time. But I think if you did this way, right, you've got Ndidi and Dakova Reed that I think are more better suited to the 10s, because that's something with Fatau. If you're going to play a sort of 3-4-3 system, is that the idea here is that those guys are providing width and then your 10s are kind of coming in narrow, right? And that's like a big difference, because what we've got is our squad literally doesn't have any out and out 10s right now. Maybe now that we've signed Bobby Reed, we've got one, but we don't really have like, a Maddison type of player. So if we're going to do that, where can you get your best thing? Fatau's got pace. He was used on that side quite a few times by Maresca, either coming on or he'd flip the wingers and stuff like that to kind of stretch the game. You got Ricky P then on the other side, and then you managed to get Ricardo and Ndidi, Wings, the Reed. You got like a lot of the players potentially in the team at any one time. So that's something he could do. I personally wouldn't do this, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like this being used by Cooper at some point, because I think he's shown that he can be pragmatic at times, and you've got like a lot of kind of hard workers. I think some kind of variations of that. So here's the same thing of a 3-4-3. This time, though, I did put Fatau in his quote-unquote preferred position. And this time what I've done is I put Christensen into the team instead. And that's a player that we haven't talked about. He's been talked about maybe being used as a make-way. He's had an interesting Euros. He was good in some games, but he was absolutely awful against England, where he gave away a penalty. But he just had a very good season for Bologna. It'd be interesting to see what we could do. Like, he's a left-sided player. We know he's got an engine. He can get up and down. I could see him being used in this kind of system for that reason. Playing with Okoli on that side, that's something we could see. I think, one thing here is I've put Fast in my team instead of Justin. Now, I personally would go Justin. I think especially against Spurs, because JJ, every time that we've played Spurs, he's done extremely well against Son, who is their most dangerous player, right? That said, they moved Son to be a striker rather than on the wing. So that's a little bit different. There's some kind of get there. But I get it that you probably want to have a fast player to deal with Son. So that's potentially up for there. But look, I still think if you look at the stats, Faz had a good season last year. So again, this would be the 3-4-3. But here, what you're relying on is that, Mavididi and Fatau can make the adjustments from hugging the touchline to being able to operate more centrally. But I think they're both good enough to do it. I know that Mavididi has done it. He has played that way before in France. Fatau is a bit more unknown. But you know what? I think Fatau impressed me last season. It wasn't just his direct running, but he's got a bit of that Lamine Yamal about him, that even though he's young, he makes a lot of good decisions. So I think he could pick that up pretty quickly. And here in this kind of thing, then you've got Christensen and Ricardo, who are much more used to being bombing on, wing back type, full back type players. So I think that could suit our team if we were to play that way. Now, though, what would I do? Right? So if this was me and I was going to line up against specifically Spurs on game 1 of the season, this is a team that I would do. So yes, I've also gone 3-2-4-1 like you. Now, as you can see here, I've got Jay Golding because you can't even find Michael Golding. So whoever this guy is, I'm just using his place. But look, I think we'd probably replace that by AN other when we sign him. But at the moment, he is a left-sided central attacking midfielder. He's got good energy. He has been, already seen him in the videos. So perhaps we would start him, and you might want to get energy. This type of game, the way that I see it going is I think it's going to be a lot like the Southampton game where we won 5-0 at the end of last season. And in fact, if it was me, I would use that game as the blueprint for how I want us to play this season. Almost every team in the Premier League presses these days, which means they're going to be coming at us. And we can counter, but I want to see us counter-attack, not with just a straight ball over the top, but playing it through the lines beautifully. So I would see something like this. JJ, it's his pace. Like I say, Spurs like to use wide forwards as well. If it's not going to be Son, it's going to be Kulusevski. It's going to be, what is the old ex-Forest guy that they signed as well? The name will come to me in a moment that they signed for, like Brennan Johnson. That's his name. So, you'll need to have someone who can deal with him. And I think having Justin and Nicoli here, that gives you two players that should, on paper, be able to deal better with those wide forwards. Vestergaard, it is a bit of a doubt, but we know that he's good at building up from the back, and I think he is going to maintain his place in the team. I've gone for the double pivot still of Ricky P and Winks because, like I say, if I think that's going to be our style of playing out from the back, I don't think you can risk having Wilf in there. And what you're using your 8s for is to press the ball, really, to win the ball back quickly. I think my one worry with this kind of team is, one, the pace in the team, because there isn't much there. Sorry, not pace in the team. That's what I meant to say. Creativity is what I meant to say. Mm-hmm. Creativity in the team. Where's it coming from? It's only coming from wide areas. Like last season, like I said, with Dewsbury Hall, taking that out of this system is a massive, massive downgrade because you just aren't getting those goals and assists. And where are we going to get those from? We'll have to solve it. Now, I have gone for Vardy here, but that's actually an interesting one because here's the other thing that I was going to mention, which is your best mate, Patson. Now, I know that you are not the best fan of Patson Daka, but here's the thing, right? I think it depends on how we're going to play. Because if we are looking to play specifically on the break, right, Daka is the fastest striker we've got. It's not even close, right? The way that I see Vardy being used is I think he will be used to start some games, but I think most likely he's going to be a finisher rather than a starter, if that makes sense. And that's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. He can be valuable, right? Some teams that we play, they're going to come at us and play the high press, and some teams will be more of a 50-50. Spurs are going to come at us and play a high press. We know that. Ange's not going to change his style. He's going to play that way. So to start the game, you probably want someone who is also fast. So we've got an immediate, threat on the break. And I think if you've got Daka, Mavididi, and Fatawu there, that is lethal, right? That is 3 players that can really, really hurt you. I think Vardy, he's the sort of person you bring on with 30 to go against Spurs because then their defenders will be tired and he will look fast relative to their pace. But look, if we were to play Brentford at home, then I think I start Vardy. If we're going to play Everton at home, I start Vardy. If we play Fulham at home, I think I start Vardy. And a lot of these teams still play pressing as well, but I just don't think they've got quite the quality of players. And I think Vardy is important because he's there to win the fans over, is to make the crowd into an atmosphere, to turn us into a kind of pressing machine. So that's where I'd go. But I think lots of members of the squad would go there. So yeah, look, we're both kind of saying we would rather see the 3-2-4-1, but as I say, I could see us going for something a bit more pragmatic. And yeah, as I guess we both kind of identified there, is that we suspect that Bobby Reid might go straight into the team. I think it depends on who we're signing, right? I think if we were doing the lineups as of today, that is probably how it's going to be made sense. But I don't think our transfer business is done, that's for sure.
It's not. Sorry, I've been dying to say that one there. Leave that one there. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like this one a lot, and this one I can see being played. And I like Christensen bombing down that. He used to get Barnes involved in a lot of games and went quiet. I like him. I definitely would like to see if we can get something out of him. But he's also one I can see us getting some money for. Fatawu, I agree with you. Does play better stretched out, but we can cut in and score outside the box. Mavididi, I really like this lineup as well. But what do you think of Wilfred and Ndidi and also Winks together? We haven't seen him play in that position together. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out if he is to play that holding midfielder.
It all depends entirely on how you want to utilize them, right? And are you going to be like deep block versus pushing up? So, I've said that I wouldn't put Wilf as a pivot player, but only I wouldn't put Wilf in a pivot player when you're playing a 3-4-2-1 shape with the WV system in the way that they look, and you're looking at the interlapping triangles. Because I don't know if you've seen Kobe Mainoo playing for England right now, but what he's proved to be a revelation at, he's brilliant at taking the ball on the half turn and just moving play forward so you can pass your way out of trouble. Now that's what Ricky P can do, but Wilf is not that type of player, and it's dangerous to have him there, and teams will target him. And the last time we were in the Premier League, a lot of people said that Wilf was having bad seasons, but I don't think what people realize is that other teams identified that as a weakness in the Leicester team. They knew that Tielemans didn't have that much stamina, so when Tielemans pushed up, that's when they would jump, and when they would jump, they would only have Wilf there, and that would give them the opportunity to rob the ball. Now, if you're playing more of a classic 4-2-3-1 where you're having two sitters, right, that is less of a problem, because you're playing more of this pragmatic type of game, and you're not necessarily looking to hold on to the ball so much. And they're there really just to win the ball and give it, and you're more happier to kind of play it long. So it depends on what you're trying to do there. Just to put it out there, but yes, I mentioned that Southampton game, but we've got a goalkeeper with excellent distribution. So to be honest with you, we could play quite a deep block and then just be looking to hit the channels in Ndidi and Fatawu as our break options. And that could definitely work, right? There's no harm in doing that. A long ball over the top, if it finds the right target. We won the frigging Premier League doing that. So there's no problem in terms of doing that. And if we were going to do that, and your tactical instruction is, okay, listen, Wilf, listen, Harry, when you get the ball, you're immediately going to be pressed by Maddison, Basuma, et al. By Spurs, right? And I don't want you to mess about with those guys. I just want you to get rid of it. I want to just make sure that we're solid, and we're going to try and stretch them back and make them scared. So we expect the game to be like this. Spurs are going to have 70% of possession, but we're going to have the 2 shots on target, and we might even score off one of them because we're going to have more of a lethal break. If you want to play that way, then I think Wilf is perfectly fine in a 4-2-3-1. Like I say, if you're looking more to do this kind of Enzo style build from the back, that's a bit different. And you could also go that way. And that depends, I think, on how pre-season goes and how Steve Cooper decides to, attack game one, because there's different ways of doing it. Do you want to get the crowd up on their feet? Do you want to make a statement early on, and do you want to pen them back, or do you want to do it otherwise? As I say, I just think to myself, though, that the thing about Spurs, and listen, I've got a lot of respect for Ange Postecoglou. I think he's a wicked coach. I would quite happily like to see him at Leicester. He's a Celtic manager we should have got, if we're being honest, right? But the thing with him is that he does not change his style. And therefore, that means if you're a good tactician, right, it makes your job a lot easier, because it means that you know what to do and he doesn't necessarily know what you're going to do. And I don't think it's a surprise, for example, that last season Spurs fell away a little bit after a strong start, because once people knew what he was going to do, and then all you had to do is look back at the video and go, oh, look, Brentford did this and it worked, and we know that Spurs are going to turn up and do exactly the same thing. So if we copy what Brentford did, it's probably going to work, and it did work. So you maybe could get at them. So there you go. But look, Spurs is still a quality team. They literally took one of our best players in Maddison. So I don't think we're going to the favourites. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I fancy us to get something from that first game. That's how I'm feeling at the moment, and that's without having any more signings. I think we are well set up for teams like that. And I do think that, maybe we should move on the discussion to that for how we feel the season would go in our business so far. But I mean, I think if the mentality of the group is right, I still think we have got half a chance. And I think it's just because the way that our team is set up and the players that we've got it's a good counter to what we're going to be coming up against. Weirdly enough, even though we've just gone up a division, this team in the Championship, I think, would struggle harder, as crazy as that sounds. And the reason I think it would struggle more in the Championship is, I think, against deep blocks, without Dewsbury Hall, where are you going to be making that magic from? I'm not really seeing it, right? You'd definitely have to replace him. But as I say, in the Premier League, as I expect almost all of the games to be us not having possession as much as the opponent, or it'll be 50-50, it will be about transition. And I think this is a good team on the transition. I actually think that, the game probably to watch out for will be Everton. That'll be one of the few games where we're expected to make the running, and we might lose it on creativity. I'm intrigued to see what West Ham do, because West Ham under Moyes would be the same thing. They wouldn't, they would make us do the running. But now they've moved back over to who they got, the ex-Seville manager that's in charge there now, which is a bit of an odd appointment for them to make. How are they going to line up? Not sure. We'll see. That said, I mean, what are the games that we've got to win? I am a bit worried about Ipswich. They only finished a point behind us. They are looking very active in the market. Player for player, they might not look that good, but you've got to give them, they've got the momentum. All their star players are staying on. They've got the same manager. For us, I don't know what the players are thinking, but it's got to feel like a real kind of kick in the nads, isn't it? That like you get promoted and the manager and best player have gone. Like, what does that make the rest of you feel? So, I do hear that Cooper's a good motivator, and I think he's going to need to show that skills. I think this could be more of a man management job over tactician. The one thing I'll say just quickly, though, is that the season we got relegated, it wasn't because of player quality. How did that team get relegated? The quality was so much better than what it showed. That said, we do have to get in our minds that team, if we're being honest, was powered by James Maddison, Yuri Tielemans, and Harvey Barnes, with a sprinkling of Jamie Vardy, shall we say, on it. Maybe Ricardo Pereira, you could say. But that's really what that team was about. I think specifically it was Tielemans and Maddison. That was the team, right? That if they played good, you're winning. If they're both playing good, you win the game. If they're both playing bad, you lose the game. If they're having indifferent ones, where you got to scrap it out, kind of thing. We haven't got either of those two right now. And Tielemans got into the Champions League with Villa. Maddison went to Spurs. Was their best player probably. So that's a problem, right? We're definitely lacking a lot of quality in that regard. So we're going to have to rely, I think, upon tactics to get us that way. And we probably have to rely on hoping that one of our signings kind of comes good. Although you never know. We might already have that guy. It might be Fatawu, right? That's what we're all hoping. He looked good. That game against Southampton when he hit the hat-trick, that's when you thought, okay, he's arrived. But what I'm saying is you're going to need him probably to hit 10 goals, I think, to survive this season, right? So it's going to be tricky.
I really expect Fatawa to, if he does, because as Neil just mentioned here, shout out to Neil. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you, Neil. Luke, have you calmed down about Fatawa yet? No, I haven't. I am stressing something fierce. Just fucking announce him. How is he not the first person that was announced, man? You drive me absolutely mad.
Work permit.
It's what freaks me out about that is he played so well that I'm just like, man, other people have to be coming in for him. And apparently it's like sort of the deal going past the July 1st. That weeks me out too. But we're all just talking like he's here already. So let's just, I guess I should just relax. Now, what is really important to me is the morale. And I've talked about this before, and good comment is Cooper has to make an impression on these lads and quick. And I'm hoping that we are going to be played not counter-attacking football. We do know Cooper does like to play 3-5-2 on an occasion as well. Put this back up here. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the Mateus Sule. Some more rumours coming in there. So
go on, tell us.
No, nothing's happened yet. We'll only know when they're holding the shirt, is what I would say. It doesn't have to be that player, by the way, as well. I mean, it's kind of interesting because, as I said to you, the head versus heart thing. I mean, yeah, looking at the team, we definitely still need. Well, yeah, let's talk about that now. Because I remember at the end of last season, we were really excited to talk about the summer one because we're like,
so
we want to see Enzo Ball in the Premier League, and who do you think we'll get? And there was once upon a time, even in January, where we didn't know about PSR, so we were really excited. And is Stefano Sensi going to come along? And God, how things have changed. So yeah, I think we have to look at like what we need because one thing that's a bit of the elephant in the room is that do we need a striker? There have been some links with players, right? There was like links with Fotis Ioannidis from Panathinaikos, Habib Diallo is probably not everyone's favorite things, who's actually playing in Saudi at the moment, but he got 20 goals for Strasbourg before he went to the Saudi league. Because yeah, I mean, you've said it yourself, like Patson Daka flattered to deceive the last time he was in the Premier League. In the Championship, he wasn't used at all. Then all of a sudden, I felt he was our best player, but then by the end of the season, he was terrible again. It's like a really weird one. I guess he's a real confidence player. You said those words, not me. Tom Cannon, if he was that good, why wasn't he being played that much in the Premier League? But we do hear, according to John Percy's article, that he is going to be given a shot in pre-season. Otherwise, he'll be loaned to the Championship with teams interested. you can't rely on Vardy. I mean, I still think he will play some games and he'll finish a lot of them, but look, that man's already done his job. And I really hope we don't get relegated for his sake. I don't want him really finishing his career with another relegation. But this time round, even if that was to happen, I don't think he would be that person. So yeah, that to me seems like an obvious hole in the team to get a striker, but that's tough business to do. Are you going to find a good one there? Do you know what I'm kind of surprised is that as of right now, we haven't signed anybody on loan for the season. And I'm convinced we're going to sign 2 people from Chelsea on loan. It's like they've got way too many players. They're surely going to want them developed and we need them. Oh, can I just say quickly, we haven't been linked with him, but if we could sign anyone, for me, I would go for Fabio Carvalho, who I
was going to mention that.
Yeah.
I knew you were thinking I was going to say if you didn't say it.
I said that to you and Neil in January. He got 10 goals in 20 appearances. He was fantastic. He's ripped that division. He's proven in the league. He's a good player. He's versatile. He can play on the wing as a 10, as an 8. Really good. Look, I would take him permanently. But if you can't get him on a permanent and he's available on loan, we should be all over that, in my opinion. I think the issue is he will have a lot of choices to go to. So I don't know if we could get it or not. But yeah, look, I think it's inevitable that we are going to pick up a few people on loan like that. He would definitely be on my choice because I think someone like that is going to hit you. Because what I guess I'm saying is that his output is on the Dewsbury Hall level, which we need to replace. So, you know, how are we going to do that? And, you know, even, by the way, even if we sign Sule, right, and we're assuming he might come in as a 10, he may not. He might actually just be covered for Fatawu, right? Really, if you're building a squad, you want to have 2 players for every position to be strong. That's the fact, right? Because what happens if someone gets injured? So what happens if Fatawu gets injured? Eunice has gone. Albrighton has gone. Is Casey McAteer going to play? Maybe some games, but I think no one's seeing him as being a starter, right? So we've got Bobby Reid. He's probably going to be more from Ndidi. So the reality is we have 2 top-class wingers, but we do need to sign 2 more, right? And you do need to... Okay, so maybe now 1 more because we've got Bobby Reid. So maybe we are going to go for someone like that. In which case, that means you could also go for the midfielder. Like, was it Ant that says he wanted O'Reilly and Matthias Sule? You know, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we do that. That would be good to see.
We do have money. It's the start of a new term, right? So
correct.
I think you're better off spending and trying to stay up than the ramifications of going down with a points deduction looming overheads, either down there, hit target on ahead, and massive loss of money and a lot of players leaving. That is a scary possibility. So I do not want to see that. I agree with you. I think we could sign both. Anything else you want to add to that, Neil?
No, but I mean, we might need even more than that, I suppose, right? You know, let's say, well, yeah, I think left-hand side of the pitch is an interesting one, right? Because, like I said, we didn't sign a left-footed centre-back. So as it stands, we don't have any of those in the team, right? So does that mean we're going to be playing a left fullback? So I've got Christensen in one of my lineups, but then Luke Thomas isn't really a good replacement for him, is he? I suppose you could use JJ on that side. He has played that way, but then you've got the Kieran Trippier for England situation where, you know, you're not crossing it first time and the team just looks way more balanced with Luke Shaw. But JJ has always done a good job for us with that on in the team. What's going to happen to Will Alves and Sammy Braybrook? We'll see. You know, I suspect they'll just get loaned to the Championship.
Me too. Thank you for bringing it up. They didn't play any minutes last season, so I don't think it's the right time to play him. And my last hot take is this, and you're probably thinking the same thing because we're massive. Like, we were on the train hard. I fancy Enzo to do really well at Chelsea, like straight away, to be honest with you. I have that much faith in him. I understand why he left. A lot of people say, look at the different players there, but look at where our morale was at the last. I keep going back morale. Where the team was, I felt we're going to get back-to-back relegated when we went down. It was horrible. Mm-hmm. He really brought the Band of Brothers back, and if anyone can control that squad, it's him, and he's likable and charismatic. So I rate Chelsea to finish top first or second. I think they're going to finish above Arsenal.
That high?
I really believe in him. You heard it here first. That's the receipt.
Okay. I'm not sure I would go that far, but I think they will get Champions League. I actually think a lot of them were like, why did they sign Dewsbury Hall? But I think that is a smart thing that they did that they didn't do with Pochettino. So you know what system he's going to play. And that means that on day one, he's got a player that's proven who knows that system inside and out. And I wouldn't be surprised if for them, Dewsbury Hall for the first 3 months of the season, a bit like Maddison for Spurs, ends up being one of the top players. I think over time they'll phase him out and probably one of their players of a higher ceiling comes in instead. But I think that's really smart of them, of like, you know, just to hit the ground running. You've got someone who even in training that he can just be like, hey, whoever the other number 8 is, just look at what Kiernan's doing. He's moving this time, he's moving that way. You know, it's all about the movement. It's not about your technique and stuff like that. But look, we're not a Chelsea fan channel. So, you know, and I'll be honest with you, when he comes, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what reaction he gets. The thing I would say is that, like, you know, people can knock him, but I mean, Enzo and Kiernan going has saved us from PSR. We clearly weren't going to sell any other players. So at the end of the day, they've done what they need to do. But it's a new era. It'll be exciting. And look, I think, as I said last season, I'm going to be extremely interested to see what our pre-season games are if they're going to be streamed. And I'll be analysing them with a very fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm really, really curious to see how we're going to line up. I expect to see different formations for sure thrown around. And Neil, thank you so much. I've probed you with enough questions and taken enough of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. Let's stay positive and look forward to these games, like you said, to analyze.
Come on,
guys.
Leicester.
Come on, Leicester. If you like this, please like and subscribe. Diego, thank you for your comments, mate. I really appreciate you and everyone else that's watched. Have a good weekend, and I'll catch you on the next one.